The Democrats have been having their cake and eating it too for the past 60 years. They convinced black people that they passed the Voting Rights Act, not Republicans, which they didn't, and got black people to switch to the Democratic Party, where blacks were 100% Republican before. Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. First, let me define the word voting bloc. It refers to a group that political parties have separated from the rest that they can sway as an entire group to vote one way. But here's the thing. A voting bloc is a bad thing. Voting bloc bad. Why? Because the more of a voting bloc you are, the easier you are to dupe. Let's take a look at some headlines. The irrelevant black voting bloc. Why the Democrats virtually own the African American voting bloc and how deep the reasons run. The race industry depends on a black voting bloc. Where did all the black voters go on election day? That's for the midterm election. Is Obama taking black vote for granted? Some African Americans have, just a little excerpt from that. Some African Americans have watched enviously as President Barack Obama courted other voting blocs critical to his election hopes. The president pushed for repeal. I want to repeat that. President Obama courted other voting blocs critical to his election hopes. That means he went out of his way to do things for them, for those people that he knew had it out for him. I want you to let that sink in for a minute. So he spent money, he spent time, he spent political effort to get them to vote for him. He did things that, let me just read on. The president pushed for repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law that barred gays from serving openly in the military and endorsed same-sex marriage. He helped push through fair pay for women. He supported the DREAM Act, which provided a path to citizenship for young adults in the U.S. illegally. He said his administration would stop deporting young illegal immigrants. It's not an immigrant, it's if it's illegal. It's an illegal alien who enter the country as children, provided they meet certain requirements. Given that an overwhelming number of African Americans consistently support Obama, some have openly wondered if the nation's first African American president is taking them for granted. And if he is that a risk he can afford to take? The answer is yes. Why is the answer yes? Because he can take black people for granted. And it doesn't matter what he does. He could piss on Al Sharpton's head. He could poop in Farrakhan's mouth. He could kick Jesse Jackson in the balls on live national TV broadcast on every channel. And black people would still vote for him. I'm using those as examples in case people support them. I don't particularly support them, but then again, I don't support the Democratic Party now, do I? The answer is yes. And lastly, here's a headline that you don't see or don't hear about. The myth of the Latino voting bloc. So there is no Latino voting bloc, but there is a black voting bloc. A black voting bloc. So let me just touch on some of the other quote-unquote voting blocs. Single white mom voting bloc. Conservative white men voting bloc. Conservative white women voting bloc. You see something here? What do you see? There is no white voting bloc. There's this group, this little separate tiny group. Do you understand what's going on here? Whites don't vote as a bloc, right? That's how you have a Democratic Party and a Republican Party, allegedly, right? Because whites don't vote one way. And what is Obama, Mitt Romney, now Jeb Bush Jeb Bush, I don't know his name. I don't care about him. And if anybody votes for him, they're stupid. In the primaries, whatever. If you vote for that guy, I mean, you're just retarded. He's retarded. He's done illegal things. He's done criminal things. Anybody that votes for him deserves exactly what they get. So let's continue. What's the example? The example is that white people don't have a voting bloc. You have to break down white people into little tiny groups, go after them, and sway that voting bloc. And that's how you get elected. Black people don't have little tiny groups. Black people just go, oh, I'm voting. Why? Because my mama told me to vote Democrat. My daddy told me to vote Democrat. And that's it. That's all black people need. They don't actually sit down and do any thinking about it. You don't think that, well, I believe that they're not paying enough attention to Afro-punk, so I'm with the Afro-punk voting bloc. No such thing. It's just Democrat. Just Democrat. You have absolutely no identity of your own. You're just black. That's it. That's it, right? You're just black. I don't know what the African immigrants, I don't know how they vote. They might vote something different. I don't know. I've never studied them as an individual group. My thing is African American. Or Afro-American. So let's take a look at why I said the Democrats are having their cake and eat it too. Why are black people voting for Democrats? How could black people switch from being 100% Republican to being Democrat? It's 90% now, 90, 80, something like that. 70, I think it's down to 73% blacks vote for Democrat, which is a really big chunk, right? 8-6, this is a date. 8-6. On this day in 1965, the 1965 Voting Rights Act was signed into law. Contrary to myth, Republicans supported this law much more than did the Democrats. Contrary to myth, Republicans supported this law much more than did Democrats. In the Senate, 94% of Republicans voted in favor, while just 73% of Democrats voted for it. In the U.S. House of Representatives, 82% of Republicans voted in favor compared to 78% for the Democrats. I don't know why 5% or 18% of the Republicans did not vote in each of the House. I don't know how they separated from the party. Why am I saying this? Because Republicans were for the egalitarianism of mankind, which included the free man, the slave. It was their party that has had a party plank as freeing the African slave. Let me repeat that because I was shocked to find that some black people did not know that. Republicans had as their party plank to free the black man, as their party plank to free the black. It's no longer party plank because we don't have African slaves anymore. I was shocked that some black people didn't know that. And that's why black people were 100% in the Republican Party. It just made sense. Why would you vote for people that wanted to enslave you and had Jim Crow? Now, let's continue reading. Senator Everett Dirksen, Republican of Illinois, co-author of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, helped outmaneuver Democratic opposition. Quote, there has to be a real remedy. There has to be something durable and worthwhile. This cannot go on forever. This denial of the right to vote by ruses and devices and tests and whatever the mind can contrive to either make it very difficult or to make it impossible to vote. End quote. The 1965 Voting Rights Act achieved for African Americans a major goal of the GOP's Reconstruction era civil rights agenda, which the Democrats had blocked a century earlier. So the Republicans had tried this a century before this even came out in 1965. So in 1865 or in 1860, the Republicans had already tried this. And the Democrats claimed that it was they that passed the Voting Rights Act. The Democrats, who had the Jim Crow laws, who had the voting blocking laws in place in the South to obstruct black people from voting, the Democrats claimed that it was they that passed the Voting Rights Act. Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. And they didn't even pass with a pass it with a majority or anywhere near as much support as the Republicans. It makes absolutely no sense that black people vote for Democrats, because the entire basis of black people voting for Democrats is based on the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Go look it up. That's why black people started voting for Democrats. The Democrats convinced black people that it was they that passed the act. So your grandmother told her children to vote Democrat because she thought the Democrats had passed it. The Democrats that a year earlier were making her read, making her take tests, making her prove citizenship, making her prove that she had this paper, this document, this regulation form filled out, and deny her the right to vote. This woman told her children to vote Democrat because the Democrats told her that they were the ones that got all of those laws repealed. It's all based on a lie. And here's the real problem. You know what? I don't even care if you vote Democrat, but you voting as a bloc means that you are mindless. Why is there a white single mom voting bloc? Because white single moms care about one issue. And if you promise that issue, they're going to vote for you. You know what? If a black libertarian promised white single moms welfare, WIC, food stamps, without having to renew for 2 years, they'd vote for that black libertarian. That's how mindless they are. That's why they're a voting bloc. You see how mindless the entire concept is? That bloc, that chunk of people, that group, that separated group can be had just for one issue. And as black people, you can be had just by the Democrats convincing you that it was they that voted in the Voting Rights Act and not the Republicans. So they pissed on you for 200 years, then turn around and said that it was their benevolence that got all of that pissing on passed, and that you then should vote for them. I want to destroy all of this miseducation, and this is the key issue. White people, Democrats have not done anything for you. They then came out with the Great Society as a ploy to destroy, it was intentional, to destroy the black family. Intentional. I will be your black father from now on. Not only that, but you cannot have a black father around if you accept any handouts that I give you. Oh, it's sinister and vile. Isn't it? The Great Society. They did in one law what the KKK could never do. They destroyed, and Margaret Sanger, the one who created Planned Parenthood, who said that degenerate races should not be alive, degenerate races should not be alive, planted her clinics right in the middle of black neighborhoods in the inner city. Why is the inner city the way it is? Because whites could move away. That's why the inner city is the way it is. Whites moved out. They didn't want to be around black people. It's just that simple. So you had white people living next door to black people. And when they got enough money, they'd hit the road jack. Margaret Sanger, Democrat. Planned Parenthood is a Democrat-supported thing. Margaret Sanger wrote and instructed Hitler how to run his campaign. When the President of the United States wrote Hitler to say, "What are you doing to the Jews?" Hitler wrote back and said, "I learned this from you on how you treat your black people." Yes, the Democratic president. And what did the Democratic president write back? Nothing. Black people are voting. Here's what I want. I want black people to vote for the Libertarian Party. Why? What is the Libertarian Party? It's the party of leave me the hell alone. No, you're not going to have food stamps. No, you're not going to have welfare, but you're also not going to be paying taxes out the wazoo because they're supporting welfare, food stamps, this regulation, that regulation. Also, you'll be able to open up a business without going through this regulation, that regulation, blah, blah, this fine, that fine, this fee, that fee. You'll be able to form a corporation without having to pay $2,000 for a lawyer and retainer. You can do all of this. You can just sign it and you're done. So you can accomplish what I've been trying to promote this entire time, which is fiscal empowerment, financial empowerment, economic empowerment of black people. Stop voting like you're sheep, like you got a sheepdog that's just herding you into the, all right. So all Obama has to do is get the sheepdogs in. They send out Al Sharpton, they send out Jesse Jackson, they send out Farrakhan, and they just herd you in. Oh, not Farrakhan, because Farrakhan endorsed Obama. I don't know why. And then Obama was forced to reject Farrakhan. So I don't, that sheepdog didn't work or something. Well, Farrakhan then continued to endorse Obama as his brother, right? Obama, whom he didn't even know, right? They just send out the sheepdogs. They don't even need the shepherd. They just send out the sheepdogs and herd you all in. Oh, vote Democrat, vote Democrat, vote Democrat. Why are you voting Democrat? And then I want you to go policy by policy by policy, and I want you to look at what the Republicans are voting for. Then I want you to break it down into the far left Democrats, the middle Democrats, the middle Republicans, who are the establishment Republican, who actually vote the Democratic way. So if you just want to vote for policies, you might as well vote Republicans, because the middle Republicans, the establishment Republicans, vote exactly 100% the same as Democrats. So why are you voting Democrat? And then I want you to look at the far right Republicans. These are the Lincoln Republicans. And I want you to see why they are saying we don't need food stamps, we don't need welfare, we don't need that. Why? Because they're semi-libertarian. They're not libertarian all the way. They're semi-libertarian. But libertarians are going to say, we don't need borders, we don't need security in the borders, we don't need closed borders, but you don't get welfare, you don't get food stamps, you get no social programs whatsoever, you don't get Medicaid, you don't get Medicare, you don't get any of that stuff. So the onus to come here, do you know that 3 out of 4 Mexicans come here and get on food stamps and welfare, and they are forbidden? This is before Obama did the whole amnesty thing. My aunt is the director of one of the welfare offices. It's not a welfare office, the director of the entire whatever. And she told me that they were forbidden, have been for decades, forbidden from asking a Mexican for identification and proof of citizenship. But let a black person come in or a white person come in, they have to come up with all sorts of documents, right? How's that fair? That's not fair at all. And it's more than likely that the black person or white person has already paid into the system, has already paid taxes, has already paid into the system somehow through taxes. So they're actually taking back what they already paid in. And a lot of it is temporary. I believe the average on welfare, food stamps, what have you, is 1 year, or at least it was before Obama took office, is 1 year. So there is no ongoing welfare, except for probably, the invalids or the whatever, but they go on Social Security, so it's a different story anyway. But for the welfare stuff, it's 1 year. I know the news wants to make it look like people on welfare for decades, for generations, but the average, this is through the census data, this is through the information you can get off of the welfare agency. I don't go to those. I don't like to go to .gov websites because they put cookies on your thing, and then any agency in the federal government can access those cookies. It's a really neat trick. And I told you already in another video how to remove those cookies. It's a secret way to remove them, and it takes more than just delete cookies. You can't get them off just by going to your browser and say delete the cookies. Now, if you had a libertarian party controlling the federal and state and local government, you wouldn't have all of these social things, but you wouldn't pay all of these taxes. So the poor person who doesn't have a lot of money to begin with, and poor is temporary. Remember that once you get a job and you're on minimum wage, and then you go to 25 cents, then $1, and then you should always be looking for a higher paying job, higher paying job, higher paying job, higher paying job. That's what you should, as a worker, be. If you have absolutely no skill, you are supposed to rely on your experience as your resume. I worked here for a year. I worked here for 2 years. I did this position for 2 years. And you should be going up and up and up the ladder. That's how you do it. So as a libertarian party in control, the poor people wouldn't be paying so much. So when you go to buy a Coca-Cola, it's no longer $1.50 for a 12-ounce can. Now it goes back down to 50 cents. So the poor person has a better, higher quality of life under a lower tax base. None of this welfare and what have you. And what people don't get is that we don't need welfare. There are groups that have been in place for hundreds of years. The churches, the charities. When welfare was instituted, they actually started kicking out the charities and the churches from taking care of the poor and the indigent, who actually did a much better job than welfare. You didn't have welfare fraud under a Catholic church. You don't have that. Why? Because the Catholic Church deals with that person directly. There's no like Catholic Church dollars. The Catholic Church gives you whatever you need. The charity gives you whatever you need. There's a home that the single mom goes to, and she and her baby are taken care of, and then the single mom can go out and get a job because the baby's taken care of at the Catholic charity there, and then she's no longer at the Catholic charity because now she has a job and she saved up some money. She has an apartment. They work through all of that. Does the federal government do that? No. This is what people are not understanding. When the federal government does something, takes something over, it's bad. And that's what happened to black people. It's bad. The Great Society. We're gonna be your black daddy. So all of those people who had fell down the ladder, as a single mom or what have you, and the sexual revolution came about at the same time. Is it ironic that those two sort of coincided? You had the sexual revolution so that women were no longer shamed for going out and having sex and not thinking about the consequences, be it venereal diseases or having a child. That all came about at the same time. It's all a coincidence? I don't think there's nothing. The CIA says there's nothing is coincidence. No such thing. It doesn't exist. So then as a group, black people are voting Bloc, just a chunk. And what do the headlines read? The irrelevant black voting Bloc. They don't even have to pay attention to you. And having a black Democrat presidential candidate, oh, that was a done deal. That was a done deal. Black people would put that in their record books. I voted for the first black Democratic presidential candidate. They didn't even have to make a black political advertisement, commercial. All they had to do was announce that he was running, and black people lost their minds. It didn't matter that he's a communist. It didn't matter that he hates America. It didn't matter that he would destroy the dollar. It didn't matter that he would increase racial tensions. It didn't matter that he would destroy black wealth. It didn't matter that black deaths through racial tensions would increase dramatically. It didn't matter that all of these nasty things that we would lynch anybody else for, literally drag them out of the White House, set them on fire, hang them up, and post their pictures as the most hated man in the history of the United States. It didn't matter. I'm going to vote for this guy. It didn't matter that he associated with terroristic organizations in the United States. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that he wrote books saying exactly that, saying exactly what he wanted. It didn't matter. Voting Democrats as a black voting bloc makes you, as a black person, irrelevant. What does irrelevant mean? You don't matter. Your vote doesn't even matter. I said in 2007, black people need to make demands of Barack Obama. And if he didn't promise to complete those demands, that black people wouldn't vote for him. Just because he's black doesn't mean he gets a pass. And you didn't demand anything in the 2012 election. Didn't demand not a single thing. Nothing. Voting bloc is bad. Thank you for watching the Chicago Live Show.
Suddenly piece yourself back together now. What's your vision?